Welcome back to Today with Dr. Kaye. I'm Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead here again to have another conversation with you about some of the stories that matter. I'm joined now by Mayor-elect Brandon Scott, and I'm just excited to welcome him back to the show. We welcomed him many times as City Council President. We welcomed him when he was a candidate, and now we are one day from him being inaugurated as our next mayor. Mayor Scott, how are you, sir? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's glad to be back, Dr. K. I am still humbled by the win. Looking forward to getting right to work. Proud and energized and ready to lead the city that has birthed me and raised me and put me in this position to be able to lead our great city.
So let's talk about that long road that you've had. For some, they say, well, our mayor is very young, so the road couldn't have been that long. But for you, as someone who grew up in Baltimore City, you've seen the city go through a number of mayors. You've seen the city be disappointed by mayors in the past, disappointed by city council presidents in the past. From that perspective, as you get ready to take office, can you outline at least 2 or 3 things that you're saying, I've always wanted to change this if I ever became mayor?
Well, I think, Dr. K, that at first I always chuckle when folks say that I'm so young because when you go into something at 36 with 13 years experience where technically I can retire with a pension at this point is funny. But also I think it's always good to point out too for your listeners here on WEAA that the Baltimore Sun recently ran a story that showed everybody that I'm actually not that young. When you talk about the history of Baltimore mayors, there's just one thing that separates me from the other folks who were my age or younger, and that's my skin color. So we know how that has played a part. But when you think about it, for me, it's a couple things. One, Dr. K, isn't something that's policy related. It isn't something that's like, oh, I'm going to change this about how city government operation. I'll get to that for a minute. But one of the most important thing that I want to change about that office is that when I am mayor, I will still be the same person that the young people can touch and talk to, that citizens can touch and talk to, that will still be in the grocery store, that will still go out on the street corner, be pop up late night to whatever is going on in the city. I want people to know that just because I have a new title of mayor, at the end of the day, I am always going to be Brandon Scott from Park Heights, and that I want people to know that you can remain human. You don't have to take on this larger than life aura persona or make yourself feel like you're better than someone. No, my family raised me to understand that I am not special. I have to treat everyone the same way, no matter how much money they make, where they look from, where they come from, where they live, what they do for a living, and that's the way that I want to lead. But when you think about the issues that Baltimore has faced for the entirety of my lifetime, there are 2 things that jump out. One, of course, is that we haven't dealt with this disease of gun violence, this cancer of gun violence, in a holistic and complete way, understanding that we cannot just solely put it on the shoulders of the police, while there is responsibility for them. So finally, getting that comprehensive approach with the executive buy-in is something that I'm eager to do. And then also professionalizing city government to make sure that we are running an efficient, effective 21st century government that are meeting citizens' needs and breaking down those broken, outdated structures and practices that have allowed for that corruption and that disappointment to grow and foster.
Let's go back to the skin color for a moment, because I'm familiar with the article in the Baltimore Sun, which I thought was excellent, just kind of debunking the myths that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a young person in charge of Baltimore City. There is a long history. And what sets you apart from former mayors that were in their 30s is your skin color. Do you think that Baltimore City, given the fact that we're 60% or so African American, is it a much higher mountain to climb, a much steeper road for African American men and women to leave this city with the type of confidence that, say, people have given former mayors that were not African American?
Absolutely, and I can only speak to it from my standpoint, right? I can't imagine how immensely tougher it would be for a young African American woman to be in this position, right? Because it's hard enough for me, and we know that there's this thing called male privilege. So I can't imagine that a young sister, but we know, right? And Dr. K, you think about everything that I've done, it's always been about, oh, I'm young. Some people say, oh, well, he's so angry. Why is he always so mad? And I barely even raise my voice, right? Like it's we know, and I always point this out, especially when I'm talking to young people in Morgan State and other, no matter where I am in the city. I know this because my entire life, think about it. Uh, People in Baltimore have been conditioned that people that look like me, that are around my age, and that are my sex, to be quite frank, are the problem of Baltimore City, right? Young black men have been the people that folks have said, this is what's wrong with this city. So for some people who have these racist ideas and tendencies embedded in their head, and let me be very clear, that's not just folks who aren't black, right?
Right.
When they see me, they automatically think, no, this person can't be ready to solve the problem because this generation, and specifically, but young black men, they're the problem, they're not the solution. Instead of doing what the citizens of Baltimore have now said, is that we have looked and saw and tried and did everything else. Maybe it's time for us to say that a young man who grew up here, who saw shootings before being 10, who lived through zero tolerance policing, who went to college, didn't do like so many people do and leave and don't come back, who came back, worked in communities, ran mentoring programs, went to city government, worked every step of the way. Maybe it's time to invest in one of our own to show to the rest of the world. And for me, I take that with the utmost responsibility, and also take it because this is what I say to young people. When they say, what do you want your lasting legacy to be? I
Mhm.
say, well, first and foremost, you don't go from being 0-16 to winning the Super Bowl in a year, let alone 4 years, right? This is about foundation building. And that one day, what I want people to be able to say is, some young person that I've talked to in a school, on the street, and in a basketball game, football game, whatever, will one day stand on the shoulders of the foundation that I've built, not have to struggle through all the stupid, crazy things that I've had to go through in here, so that they can take Baltimore to its highest heights. That's the kind of legacy that I want to leave.
Now, what's interesting is when we start talking about what's been happening in this city to shift over the last 4 years or so, there's been this sense that we started off with strong leadership. And then here comes, of course, Healthy Holly. And then we had a change in leadership. And there's a sense that there's been no one in control, really, with the long term vision. So when you think about your first 100 days, outside of COVID-19, outside of the rising tide of gun violence and homicide numbers here, we also have to think about the fact that people have been acting as if there's no leadership here. So how do you restore their trust, not just in you as an individual, because people do trust you, but the trust in our government here in Baltimore City to actually have our best interests at heart and really do something to turn around some of the ills that we've been complaining about for decades now.
Yeah, I think that you're spot on, Dr. K. And it's not just about me, right? And I think that's where the leadership, and one of the biggest failures of leadership in the past has been, is that they have thought that one person plugged into the existing system of city government was going to put confidence back into the city, but also to fix it and solve the problems. That's not the case, right? What I always tell folks is that I don't want to be, nor do will I be the smartest person in the room at all times. One of the most
Mm.
important things that I'm going to do in that first 100 days, Dr. K, as you said, dealing with COVID and dealing with gun violence, obviously immediately, is building out a team of people that will help us and show how we can work together in a unified way to make Baltimore the best representation of itself. That means going out, recruiting, finding our first city administrator, making sure that that's the best and the brightest person who has the capability to make city government efficient and effective, handling the issues that citizens have had their hearts broken over time and time again, no matter how small or big, right? That means the same thing for DPW. Finding someone for the Department of Public Works who will once and for all fix the water bill system and do it quickly, get trash and recycling going in the way that it needs to be, housing to make sure that we are providing adequate housing, redeveloping neighborhoods that have been ignored, racially ignored in Baltimore, to be quite honest, and make sure that that agency is operating. And it goes on and on. Equity and civil rights, which we know equity is going to be a big part of my administration. What I am going to be doing is building that team. And then, as we're getting the reports out from our transition, making sure that that group of talented people from Baltimore and afar are ready for the challenge of building a new Baltimore from the bottom up. This is not going to be, Dr. K, a sexy term of cutting a bunch of ribbons and
Right.
building up and celebrating. No, this is not the time for celebrating. And we will celebrate wins along the way because we'll always tell our story in a better way. But this is a time for work, getting your hands in the dirt, making sure that we are showing people, not talking about it, but showing them why they can begin to trust city government again.
And this is a different time. I think about the celebratory attitude and feeling when Barack Obama was president, and it was about the work at some point, but we were partying in the White House as much as possible because we had a black man in the White House. This is a different era and a different time. When Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are inaugurated, it's not about having big parties at the White House. President-elect Joe Biden is talking about the first 100 days asking everyone to wear masks. And Dr. Fauci on our show says he agrees with that. We also had Dr. DeRaza who said that here in Baltimore City, our positivity rate is around 5.5 or so percent, whereas it's 8% in Maryland as a whole. So it seems like Baltimore is doing a little bit better, a whole lot better than Maryland. How will you ensure, Mayor Scott, that people will wear the mask and in so many ways fall in line, not in a bad way, but saying, let's give this a try and see what happens?
Yeah, we know that we have to do that. And listen, let me be first to say that Dr. DeRaza has been a fabulous leader through this, and she will continue to lead the health department in my administration. But it's about what you and I have talked about multiple times. We have to follow the public health guidance, right? And we are here in Baltimore. Not only do we have Dr. DeRaza, but we also have Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland Medical Center, who are the groups who are leading these efforts around the world. So we, of course, we have a resource that no one else has. I, as a mayor, have resources that no other mayor has because I can talk to them each and every day. And that's what will be guiding it. And what folks have to understand is that we are at a critical point. And we are going to have to work more in a collaborative way regionally to make sure that everyone is working and being as safe as possible. We would hope as we move forward that more things are done at the state level following that public health guidance. But we will not be afraid to do, if you look at us, Dr. K, in that positivity rate, we know that the tough decisions that Dr. Jaraza and Mayor Young made had a big part to do with that. I will not be afraid to make those tough decisions. Again, this is about doing the right thing, not the popular one. And we also are going to have to communicate in a different way. You know me, I love to communicate in unique ways. And I've been telling folks, right? Listen, this is the reality. It's my generation. It's folks between 30 and 39, the second highest group, and then 20 to 29 are the highest group. Only 11 deaths as a few days ago when we are talking about this in those age groups. However, our parents and grandparents generation have most of the deaths. Essentially what that means is that people in my generation are killing their own parents and grandparents with this virus, with this disease. We are going to tell people bluntly what you should not be doing. Now isn't the time to be going to the bar or the hookah lounge and then going home or going to my I've seen it, folks in Baltimore like, well, it's open in Florida. We're gonna go down and have a Baltimore takeover in Miami and then come back home and then you don't know why your grandmother's sick. Like you have to be more responsible. Having a socially distanced Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah holiday this year it's better than not having them with you for one next year or the year after that. And folks have to understand how we know about COVID fatigue, right? It's a real thing. We can't get lax. This is the most critical point. We have to be prepared for what's to come so that we can get back to normal, which wasn't good enough. And we have to improve and make sure that when we're recovering, there's an equitable recovery that makes all of our neighborhoods and people stronger than we were before.
Now, I know here in Baltimore City, when we talk about sacrifice, there is a feeling that we sacrifice a lot. We're always being told to wait. We will solve these problems, things will change, things will get better, and they haven't gotten better. You know this for a fact. And so homicide is out of control, as it has been for quite a long time, but just more recently, at least in the last 6 to 7 years. I mean, you're talking 300 plus has been the average for us. We're seeing that carjackings are rising. I mean, I don't think there's one night that I go to sleep in this city that I don't hear the helicopters and the sirens. I mean, I'm over in the third district, so I can only imagine what is happening around the city. So, without slogans and promises, what is one specific thing that you can do? And then one specific thing that you can charge us to do? Because I argue, as you know, that the mayor can't solve everything. The mayor has to work along with us. So, we need to do our part too.
Yeah, I think Dr. K, first and foremost, we know, like you're saying, we've been losing way too many people. And yes, we can talk about the last 6 years, and the previous six were a lot better. But even then, we were still losing far too many people. And we've allowed violence in Baltimore to be normalized, and we can't accept that, and we won't moving forward. And the reality is, as you point out, my entire life, the 36 years that I've been taking breath, we've been one of the most violent cities in our country, right? Facts. Nobody can argue with that. And what we need first and foremost is that we need a mayor who will accept the responsibility for what's going on and accept the responsibility of working with everyone, including our community, to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. But we know, and I'll give you this, we know that violence in Baltimore has solely been put on the shoulders of the police. We know that that has to change. We have to think about the trauma that's impacted. We have to think about the substance abuse in a different way. We have to think about creating opportunities in neighborhoods for people who are turning to a life of crime. But this is what we will do. We will fully implement a group violence reduction strategy because we know most of the violence in Baltimore is committed by a small group of people on another small group of people. We will focus on them and target them, identify them, not just from a law enforcement point of view, which we will do and say, listen, we know who you are, we know what you're doing. If you do not change your life, we will remove you from these neighborhoods and bring peace to them. But when they say that they want to change their life, we will do what the mayors in the past have failed to do twice in when implementing this program, and that's bring the resources that allow them to change their life. And we will also, Dr. K, in a city where 70% of the weapons that are recovered by BPD come from other jurisdictions and or states, target people that are gun trafficking while simultaneously making the investments into expanding our safe streets or our violence interrupters program and modernizing them, dealing with reentry in a different way, not waiting for people to come home, and also making those capital investments into those red line neighborhoods so that we can create opportunity.
And so I know I don't have much time with you. So my last two questions. The first is that there was tension between you and at this point, former Mayor Young with the Board of Estimates with his push to increase the staff by three. There was a whole vote where he controlled votes on the Board of Estimates. It passed with a 3-2 vote, but you did not allow funding to go toward that. A lot of tension that came out. And of course, we moved into other things with COVID-19 and other things took our interest as it should have. Well, what's happening now with you and the incoming city council president, Nick Mosby, who is looking at spending upwards of $700,000 to hire 9 people to increase his staff to 37. Like something about that doesn't sound right to me. And so I thought I'd come to you to kind of get some understanding of this.
Yeah, and first, let me be very clear, Dr. K. I understand that the council over the next term will have increased responsibility in budget and around equity. I introduced the bill of requiring fiscal and equity analysis of every bill and voted for the other pieces of legislation as well. That said, we have to be very clear about the fiscal crunch our city is facing both due to COVID-19 and the increased responsibility that will come as we prepare to meet the Carroll Commission recommendations. In fact, that is why I cut the city council's budget, because Mayor Young, and this is where the original thing came from. Mayor Young asked every agency last year to prepare a 5% budget cut in order to prepare for the first round of Kerwin funding. I did that in the city council, and then to have them turn around and without, and let me be very clear, it's also about the process. You should not be adding positions to a agency without the approval of the agency head. We had documents that they said were sent by my office that weren't sent. That kind of stuff smells of the things that I am trying to fix for in Baltimore City government to begin with. We cannot have those kind of backdoor, quiet, skirting the rules things going on. That has to stop. And additionally, the way, like when you think about that, they're submitted without a funding source. They were submitted on the same day, adding these positions that they were laying off DPW workers, frontline DPW workers during a pandemic. This is also when they presented a budget that cut the communicable disease portion of the health department during a pandemic. As I've said from the beginning, I will work with the incoming council president to ensure that he has the expertise that he needs in his office, and to help them as they, over the next few years, have that increased responsibility, because it's also important to remember that they don't get the increased budget responsibility until July 1st, 2022. We will make sure that we do that, starting first, Dr. K, starting first with looking how to reorganize existing resources. That's exactly what I did with the city
Mm.
administrator position. We are creating that position from existing resources in the mayor's office. The same thing with the deputy city administrator position that are required by law. We cannot forget the fiscal situation that we're facing as a result of this pandemic, and the need to focus on being responsible stewards of city dollars now more than ever. But we will work with him to make sure that they get the resources that they need and the positions that they need to meet the increased responsibility over the next few years.
And so my last question to you, and it's not a political question, Mayor Scott. I think about what wakes me up at night, what worries me, and as a Black mother in Baltimore City, I more often than not I wake up thinking about the safety of my sons. Like that is a priority for me. What wakes you up at night? What is it that is the thing that just worries you the most about Baltimore City? Not about your own personal life, but just what wakes you up at night about this city?
Well, Dr. K, you're first assuming that I'm asleep at night. What
My
keep
hope is
what
that we need you, so I'm hoping that you're
what
resting.
what keeps me up at night, and this is what I always say, the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I look at my phone to see the incidents of violence or unfortunate things that happen in overnight. And the last thing I do before I go to sleep is the same exact thing. The loss of life in Baltimore, the that happens too far often, to too many communities, to too many families. When people say that 300 like murders, I think about that as 300 people, right? 300 people who won't, young people who won't recognize their full potential. Fathers who won't see their sons anymore, mothers and daughters who won't be with families, people that can't even have a Zoom Christmas this year. That's what I think about, and how we have to, not just from a city government point of view, because I think, as you pointed out, this has to also, we're going to have to also increase responsibility in the community. How we can no longer accept that people can die simply because someone had a beef on Instagram, or said someone to someone's girlfriend or boyfriend, or wanted to leave someone, or owe somebody $5 on $1,000 or something like that. We have to be better at protecting and valuing the lives of all Baltimoreans, especially young Black Baltimoreans.
Mayor Brandon Scott, next mayor of Baltimore City. We appreciate you. We support you. We are so excited for your administration, and we look forward to working with you to transform Baltimore so that we can be the best that we know that we can be. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Gay.
Stay with us, folks, for more conversations that matter right after the break.